Hare Krishna. A very warm welcome to everyone for yet another extremely special session of Practical Spirituality. Today we have a very special and very senior devotee couple with us. Um, I think Mataji would also be coming, Proji, or is it going to be just you? You're mute, Pro. I can't hear you. Sorry.
So something and unavoidably had to come, which she had to get involved with.
Okay,
So
brilliant.
sorry she couldn't join us today. So I'm
No problem. No
alone
problem.
today.
Yeah. Anyway, so Prabhuji and Mataji, I'll just briefly introduce you, Prabhuji. Yeah. So, His Grace Dwarkadish Prabhu and Her Grace Vishaka Priya Mataji, both of them, we are very grateful to have Prabhuji with us today. Both of them are very senior devotees and counselors and expert guides in spiritual life for many couples all over the world. They have been members of the ISKCON community at Radha Gopinath Temple in Mumbai since the beginning of Radha Gopinath community, and they have been nourishing many families in their spiritual practice. Dwarkadish Prabhu is also a doctor. He has been practicing in Bhaktivedanta Hospital in Mumbai almost since its inception. And Vishaka Priya Mataji, she guides many young girls in spiritual life, and she is very well known for putting up very beautiful, dramatic presentations of Krishna conscious life as well. So they have basically been devotees since forever, you can say. And today, on the occasion of Independence Day, Prabhuji has very kindly graced us with his presence and taken out time to be with us to enlighten us about what really independence and dependence is, right? And this the concept of interdependence and how it can apply to us in our personal lives. So thank you so much, Prabhu, for being with us. We can get started on now. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. My gratitude to be honored with this privilege of being in this very wonderful channel called Practical Spirituality, which is giving our worthy audience the opportunity to learn how this very special science of spiritual science, Atma Tattva Vigyan, can be brought down to a level where we can apply it in whatever field we are, whatever zone of activity we are performing into our Dainandin daily lives. So thank you for this opportunity on this. And what gives added joy is today is a special historic day. We are on the 75th glorious anniversary of our independence, 1947, 2021. So that is why the topic today has been selected like that, talking about dependence, independence, interdependence. So as we go through this discussion, we'll be presenting some thoughts on this on the subject. For all of us to munch and to ruminate about and see how this can be pave our way a little further towards to the glorious goals of our life. So when we think of independence, of course, we think of Swaraj. We think of the great times when it has been like a dream come true for thousands upon thousands and thousands of Indians who very boldly gave their lives. It is not just emancipation from the British, the movement which began in 1857, national uprising movement, but it is probably something which we've been under foreign invasion for over 1,000 years, right from times when the Mughals attacked from Afghanistan. And in prior to that, actually, the Srimad Bhagavatam talks about Kala Yaman attacking Mathura from Afghanistan with 30 million soldiers. So it looks like this very special land, which was much bigger earlier, which called as Bharatvarsha, has been on constant invasion, attack, and colonial expansion of invaders from a long time. And therefore, how many millions and millions of lives have been lost to preserve the sanctity of our independence is beyond human comprehension. And yet, today we are the worthy recipients of this independence movement. So let us feel extremely proud about what we have with us. It's not something which just come cheap, though we may, a rich man's son usually doesn't value the hard work of the father to bring the riches to him. So we want to be more worthy than that for all our ancestors who worked hard for bringing us to this day today. So when you talk of independence, of course, we're talking about independence from what? And dependence depends on what? And independence means independence on what, right? So we need to clarify these three words today in some depth to understand what this really means into our lives, right? So I think what came to my mind first is, a child grows. A child is in the womb of his mother, so he's very, very dependent. He grows up, he's come out of the womb and sees that the brightness of light of the day, and then even then through his infancy and early childhood, he's dependent. As he grows up, 5, 7, 10 years old, he becomes he knows to take care of himself and goes into a state of less dependence, right? And as he goes to adolescence, he may start getting his own sense of self-worth, his identity in this world. By the time he reaches 18, 20 years old, he starts forming his worldviews, right? And he becomes even less dependent on his parents, right? So that dependence, which was extremely high and almost 100% in the start of his life, actually starts coming down, right? And then, of course, he goes for his career and he marries, and then he feels that he's feeling more confident that he can face the world and do things on his own. So he goes into a state of semi-dependence or non-dependence from his parents. And he may even feel that I do not need them so much now, because he wants to, in American countries and in the West, they figure out their own ways. After 18 years, nobody lives with their parents and they are like independent of the family, correct? A trend which is creeping into our country as well. However, from that apparent independent state from his family, he then comes in contact with the opposite gender, where a boy and a girl can start feeling some sort of attraction for each other, right? Some sort of infatuation, attraction, which is primeval, which is biological, which happens in all species of life. And they start feeling that now they feel dependent on each other's love, kindness, affection, right? And then they decide to get married, right? So what happened in the marriage? Now, taking the cycle of this child a little further, right? Now he's married. So we go into that. So as I'm saying, you are understanding that he's going through different phases of dependence, less dependence, interdependent, and now he's getting married. So again, he becomes dependent. So he feels that now without this girl or this boy, my life will be very incomplete. And he feels emotionally now, he's no longer physically dependent on his parents, but he feels emotionally dependent on his object of love. And they first start getting married, and then they get married and life goes on. And then there are two pathways which can happen, essentially, right? If the marriage lasts for a long time, which is desirable, which is what we take vows for at the time of marriage, whether it is Christian or Hindus, we all take marriages that we shall only part at the time of death, right? In that we shall part, we want to stay together. And that's desirable by both the parties, boy and the girl. And that relationship will last for a lifetime of 30, 40, 50 years of marriage, provided there is a sense of interdependence, is it not, right? When the girl feels that I need this man in so many ways for my physical, emotional upkeep and well-being, and if he's in a devotional marriage, which we are all practicing, spirituality here, so she needs that I need this person who is spiritually qualified to guide me further on the path of spiritual growth also. And the boy feels similarly that this girl has been of so much use to me. She's been like a great friend to me, a comrade. Therefore, there is a sense of wantingness there. And then suppose they have a misunderstanding, which is very common. I think we all know that. Everybody, I think, sitting there, out there in the audience is a grihastha, right? Or maybe a few unmarried boys and girls. I do not know. But everyone knows that, if a grihastha says, I know I had a fight in my life with my life partner, you know that is the biggest joke and the biggest lie. So it cannot be like that, correct? So they have misunderstandings, they got discordial relationships can take place with various issues, etc. Right? Now, what happens in that discord situation? If the mood of interdependence is very high, or is a mood of independence very high? So what card are they going to play, right? When there's a serious disturbance in the relationship, it is threatened by some issue, right? Could be anything, financial, personal, whatever, in-laws, could be anything, right? Anything which is deep enough, not the small things like why did you keep the fan on, why did you keep the tube light on, why did you not close the drawer, or where did you keep the stapler? Not such things, but like real deep, strong issues, right? Which can also happen potentially. So if the consciousness, the mind plays the independence card at that point of time, then that person is going to feel that, yes, I must go towards doing something somehow for a resolution, to actually solve the problem, to really, maybe you can use the forget consciousness, or maybe you want to take some help, or you may reveal to their friends, or to maybe their counselor, or maybe to take some help from outside, but he will do something to save his marriage, because he knows, or she knows, that both the parties they feel the sense of interdependence. But if unfortunately he plays the independence card, and I don't need this person, I think he was going to be this and that, and the clarifications were that he would play this role in their life, and he didn't play that type of role. I don't need this person now. So if the unfortunate situation where he plays the independence card, they may go for either a cold war and stay together, right? Or they may really go for a separation, temporary separation, or they may go for a long-term separation, right? So we can see this different type of things are happening. Now, therefore, when you talk of and so as we said in the beginning, during early part of when the infatuation stage of this relationship, there is dependence of the boy and the girl, and then goes into, for survival of the relationship, it has to be in a state of interdependence. And if it is going to continue through the rough times, you still have to keep playing the interdependence card, right? Because you know that you need the person in your life, and there's nothing so great that has happened which can, which is so important that we should, allow the relationship to break off, right? But if unfortunately you are inspired by the wrong thoughts, by the wrong guidance, or whatever, if you play the independence card at that point of time, it may go for, it may go in a different direction, unfortunate direction. So what we're driving at is basically that in this world, for relationships to actually go on smoothly, right, we need to constantly play the interdependence card. Right? That means the both persons feel that, yes, I need, right? When an employer feels that I need this employee, right? Because he's useful, he's doing so many wonderful things for my company, and he's efficient and this and that. And of course, the employee is feeling that I need this money, I need this boss, I need this profile, I need this work culture to really show my skills and show my grit, whatever I have to offer to the company. So there is a sense of when the independence of the company and the employer-employee is there, then there's a long-term relationship. The moment they feel that I don't need this person, like it happens, maybe there is a economic collapse, or during COVID times, I don't need this person, right? And then have to leave. So most of the time, what we need to understand is that the interdependence is of paramount importance. And most relationships in this world, even when you take Ramayana, for example, the very strong relationship which we see, which takes place in Ramayana, of course, we find Lord Ramchandra is exiled and goes to the forest, and unfortunately, Mother Sita is kidnapped, and then there is a big search for Mother Sita, and then that search leads them to Kishkinda, and then now Lord Ram and Sri Lakshman are alone. I mean, they need to have some clue as to where is Mother Sita. They get some rough clues from Kabanda and Jatayu like that, but where exactly she is and how she is, they need some help, right? So Ram is in a state of apparent helplessness. And at that time, we see Ramayana brings us to a point where this particular principle of interdependence becomes highlighted very strongly in Ramayana, where Vali has been a terror for Sugriva. Vali has been terrorizing him, kicking him every day, abusing him, giving him death threats, chasing him from place to place till he found his shelter at Matanga Rishi's ashram because he was cursed not to go there, right? While he sort of kidnapped Sugriva's wife, Ruma. So he was, a person who was almost like a terrorist to Sugriva and to the people who are living there in Kishkinda, right? So Ram being a Dharmatma, right? So then we have an ally now created, right? You find this in Ramayana. This beautiful thing happens where there is a sacrifice which Hanuman creates, and now they become friends. So Ram is helping Sugriva to get his goals done, to be a righteous king for the kingdom of Kishkinda. And Sugriva in turn will help with his millions and billions and quadrillions of monkey soldiers from all over the world to come over, right, to help in this great mission of finding Mother Sita. So that relationship gets consolidated, and then a long-term relationship is created. There are some challenges in between, no doubt, but because interdependence is there is a reason to, for some time Sugriva got involved with amorous dealings with, during the 4 months of Chaturmasa. He sort of forgot his duty, his role, his obligation, his gratitude, right? But then again, because Ram needed him, there was a threat given to him, there was a warning given to him, and again he sort of subdued down, calmed down, and again this independence was created. So Ramayana itself gives us, which is the most powerful scripture in the world to teach about relationships. We see that long-term relationships were created when we create this role of interdependence, right? So, like for example, in the temple, what is the strongest model of preaching in the temple? We are here in Prabhupada's society, and we want to bring Prabhupada's movement to the world, so that people in the world who are bereft of Krishna consciousness will get it. So which is the strongest model for bringing this movement to the world? Well, there's book distribution, there are temples, prasad distribution. There are so many things are there which we want to do to propagate. But what seems to work the best in terms of creating a stable environment of preaching is when the congregation and the outside community, the world outside, sees that there is a synergy between the two, between the ashrams, especially the brahmachari and the grihastha ashram, right? So when the brahmachari understands, for example, that I need the grihastha's help for organizing the program, for creating the background, playing the mic, creating the funds, doing the follow-up preaching, etc. I need the grihastha. The grihastha says that I cannot preach full time. I have got my job, I've got my family, I've got my children, I've got my responsibilities. I can't preach like this, full time, but I can help somebody who is preaching frontline, right? So I get my share of service of helping the mission of Srila Prabhupada and spreading Krishna consciousness. And Brahmachari says, I need his help also. So even Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the model works very well, beautifully in Gaur Leela also. The Mahaprabhu is a sannyasi. He doesn't have funds. He's sort of, in one sense, even the Supreme Lord is a renunciate. But for preaching, he needs so many things. So Pratapruddha Maharaj is sort of recruited by him, where he will do all the activities whereby the propagation of Krishna consciousness will take place. So you find synergy between a big king who's a grihastha, and you have who has resources, funds, power, prestige, position, society, and you have a sannyasi who's empowered, who's great, who's knowledgeable, who can give direction to the society. So you find that it's a great synergy of Pratapruddha Maharaj and Lord Chaitanya, right? So time and again, we find from our holy scriptures that the most beautiful model which we want to keep in our lives, to keep all the relationships going, right? Is this beautiful concept of interdependence, right? And you take it a little higher in one sense, that even if you take it like the Brijbas, you take it, let's say, Srimad Bhagavatam, and the Brijbasis are supposed to perform, and Brijbasis, pious people, they perform pujas, anushthan, various ceremonies, various vratas, right, to please the demigods, right? So now we're talking about synergy between humans and the higher realm entities, the demigods, right? So demigods need these, need this for their nourishment. They need the supply of, various oblations to nourish them. And so they get it from the earthly beings, and in supply, they will give them, as Brajbasis felt, in the rains and whatever they need. Everything in this world is controlled by demigods. So there's a synergy between the human beings, between the nature and demigods. So that interdependence. So when we see that we are interdependent, we are not independent. And the problem arises where? What is the problem? Let's talk about the problem mechanics, right? This is about what should be, but let's talk about for a minute about what is often not like that. What goes wrong, right? What seems to go wrong is when the human being starts feeling that he is independent, right? Independent. So even though we are talking about Independence Day today, but actually that consciousness is something which we should understand more deeply, is something which is worth thinking about, whether independence is the best way to go about in our life. So the moment, as we said in the beginning, the husband and wife feel independent, then there's going to be a break. The son and the daughter feels, I don't need the parents, there's going to be a break in the relationship, right? So the moment the human being feels that he is independent type of existence in this world, right? And therefore, there is nobody there to govern him. There is nobody here to, he's not responsible, not accountable. And that he goes to a reckless behavior whereby he starts living the life the way he wants. And that is termed as irreligious, impious, and even demoniac, right? So there is no recognition, acknowledgement of the fact that we all are being governed. That's like we are dependent on the government of India, even though we are independent of the British, right? Or Mughals, or Portuguese, or whoever else came before that, all those sort of freedom fighting things, right? But even though we are independent of foreign invasion, foreign rule, we are dependent on the government of India, right? For so many things, correct? So, because, and especially where we are responsible for the laws which are made by the Constitution, correct? And the moment a person feels that he doesn't have to, then he is practically, he evades the taxes, or he steals, or whatever else he does. So he actually, the moment we feel independent, we go into a wrong zone, right? The wrong zone. And then we get implicated. So either we get implicated with the law, which nabs you, which catches you, which puts you into jail, right? Or you get implicated, if not by the government, if not sufficient to catch you, then definitely we are responsible for every, not thought, in Kali Yuga, luckily the thought is not accounted for, but every word, every act, we are responsible, because we are being governed and dependent on how the laws of nature are going to judge us. We are being constantly judged by the Paramatma, the law, as in the heart, who's called as the Upadrashta Anumanta, passive observer, permitter, right? So we are being constantly judged. Therefore, to feel that I'm independent, to feel that I can do anything I want, whenever I want, right? That is the bane, that is the curse of modern man. To feel himself that I am not responsible. You find t-shirts, like you find this young boys, girls, not they wear, I follow no laws. I am God, right? This small story. Srila Prabhupada was sitting, maybe, I'm not sure, maybe in Boston, but I could be wrong, right? And this young man comes into his, he's just coming. He's coming from afar, and he's walking to Prabhupada's room. And Prabhupada looks at him and throws a powerful question at him. That, have you come here to be God or a servant of God? Now that question just sort of hit him like a javelin. They just pushed him. Practically it thrust him, because he didn't expect this question from a person who has not even seen or met, doesn't know, is a complete stranger. He said, how this question was ever asked to me? Because this person, it's like Prabhupada looked through him into his heart, all down the road, into his hostel's bathroom door, and hostel bathroom had written the word, he had written on this entrance of his bathroom door, I am God. And how Prabhupada, the mystic that he was, and the devotees can be mystics also, said, are you here to be God or to become a servant of God? And that, of course, person is the glorious Giriraj Swami Maharaj. And our pranams to such a great Mahatma. That's the type of thing it was, right? When the youngsters came to Prabhupada, they said, don't trust anybody beyond 30, right? So they didn't feel they needed the government. They had completely thrown themselves off all bondage. They wanted to be independent of American government, the norms, the customs of the country, nothing at all, right? They want to be completely independent. They can do what they want, when they want. So this is a state of lawlessness of the spirit soul. right? And what that led to in America, led to the complete, what we call as the hippie movement, right? That lawlessness, that unaccountability, that rebellion against the set norms of society led to the entire thousands upon thousands upon thousands of young people in San Francisco and New York to start with, and other places thereafter, became actually hippies. And they came from very rich backgrounds. They were not people who are like impoverished and nothing to do. They're like beggars on the street, but they had all the wealth in the world because their parents become rich after the Second World War because America had grown from 1944 onwards to a very high state of economic growth. And yet, after all the comforts which life could bring into them through technology and etc., they were now rebelling. So this independent thing which they got into created the entire hippie movement, right? So then, but we need to understand that we are actually not independent from the hippie movement onwards to in any higher level. When you talk about so-called demons of the scriptures, what is a demon? Basically, a demon is not nobody, as you know, not somebody who's like having horns and big teeth and looks grotesque. That could be very refined, very gentlemanly, very apparently cultured person. Somebody like Jarasandha, who's like very cultured, very noble, helping the Brahmanas, but could be demon, right? Who hates God and hates God's devotees, right? So right from hippies onwards till the highest level of a biggest demon called Hiranyakashipu, right? Or Ravana, anyone for that matter. All of them have a common trait. What is the common trait of a person who's independent? They believe in lawlessness. The act of obedience to God is conspicuous by its absence. And therefore, true dharma in human life starts from the point where we are, the first step towards dharma is obedience. That's why Prabhupada, in fact, defined dharma as obedience to the laws of God. Dharmam to sakshat bhagvat pranitam. Right? That means we need to understand that we can never actually, the spirit soul can never actually be truly independent. When you talk about Independence Day today, we're talking about political independence, right? We're not talking about independence in totality. It's not the totalitarian independence. We're talking about political emancipation, right? There can be social emancipation. It can be where a person feels socially wants to be free, and there's freedom of speech. That means he's free to speak what he wants. So there's freedom of speech, freedom of social conduct, there's freedom from political, bondage. So there are different types of freedom in this world, correct? Today we're talking about 75th year of political independence. But are we, when you talk about it a little deeper, are we truly independent? Can we really be independent? That is a question which we want to really, tax ourselves with, this question. And I was sitting in the morning and chanting my rounds today, and we have, in my living room we have a swing, a jula, and then I was sitting across, looking at the open space and chanting my rounds, trying to be as focused as possible. And today the subject was independence. So the mind, of course, was thinking about this. So I said, are we pretty independent? So I was thinking something more practical. We're talking about practical spirituality. He said, what happens if the pump man does not pump the water every day in the morning? I kept a very practical level of dependency in this world, right? Like some of you may be living on the second floor of your buildings, the fifth floor. I live on the fifth floor. Some of you may be living on the 10th floor. If you are living in a skyscraper, you may be living on the 30th floor or whatever, right? So wherever we are living, if in the night when the municipality sends the water, that fellow has to get up in the night or early in the morning and pump the water from the lower reservoir of water, the tanks or whatever we have, and it has to go up the pipes into the upper reservoir of huge tanks we have over in every terrace. And unless it does that, then you may not get your water supply. It may be one day it's okay, but if 2-3 days the water is not pumped, you have no water. So dependent on that. And what you call the kachra wala? Sorry for using that word, kachra wala. I don't need to be disrespectful, but you open the said, "Kaun hai?" The kachra wala hai. So the wife gets the dustbin and throws it out. So what if that gentleman, who's doing this very important work of gathering everyone's dirt from everyone's house, doesn't come for 2-3 days? What happens to your house? It doesn't come for a week. So you're dependent on that trash collector also. right? You depend on the newspaper wala also, right? You depend, and what happens, even more important, okay, this is going to be very practical. What happens if the boy does not come to the house? If the maidservant doesn't come to the house, what happens to life? Every man knows that the biggest stress life can create in the family is that great day when the boy takes leave, and especially takes a leave without informing. There's no message given out that she's not going to come, and you can imagine the havoc in the house. And if she goes out for a long time, complete chaos takes place, because the wife is completely at tantrums, how to manage the whole house, children, school, housekeeping, domestic thing, this, that, cooking. So it can be a very wild thing in the house. So we're dependent. But the point we're making today is that we are dependent from the smallest insignificant person like the pump man, right? And to so many people. So we can never be truly independent. Let's raise a discussion a little higher from this practical level. Who is going to tell us, my dear friends? We are dependent upon someone to tell us what is the goal of your life, right? Who's going to tell us that? We are dependent on somebody telling us, giving direction as to what actually is the goal of my existence, right? Is it just doing the routine type of work of getting job done and creating a family and things like that, or is there something more deeper and valuable which will really actually be of inner fulfillment, can take us to that? Who will teach us that? So we increase our dependency scale now, right? Where we understand that yes, I'm dependent on someone or some source who will tell us about the goal of human existence. And that's where we open our hearts to the Holy Scriptures. The Vedanta Sutra, for example, is so powerful, right? That, life, people are living life in so many ways, doing so many things to become happy in this world. But then, right at the point, the arrow is hit, right? And the bullseye. The goal of life has been spelled out for eternity. And it will never change, no matter what political party comes or goes. There's this party or that party, right? But it is 21st century, 30th, 30th century, or 10,000 years from now, or a million years from now, this sloka is eternal. Scripture is eternal knowledge, right? And when the first verse of the Vedanta Sutra tells us clearly in 3 words, you must take it very deeply. Atato Brahma Jigyasa. Yes. The goal of life, we're dependent on the scriptures to tell us that, my dear friend, my dear Prabhu, my dear devotees, my dear people of this world, my dear living entities, right? The goal of life is to understand that you are not this body, that you are not actually a part of India, that you actually are not a part of this world. Actually, that you are Brahma. You are divine. You are a spiritual entity, completely distinct from this body and the mind and all connections of the body and the mind to this phenomenal world. You are a distinct, when I say you means I included all of us. All of us are distinct living entities engaged in this matter. We are engaged, and therefore again we come to the point of understanding that we are free from we are politically emancipated, political freedom has been achieved, but our souls are not free. Our souls are in bondage of the laws of karma, the 3 modes of material nature from time immemorial. Anadi karma phale, pori pavarnava chale. Bhakti is singing like that, right? Anadi karma phale. This karma phala business is going on for anadi, for millions and millions of lifetimes. Pori bhavarnava chale. And that is going to keep us in this bhava arnava. the ocean of birth and death, right? So now we take this discussion a little higher, even a little more higher now, where we want to understand what actually, now that we are a free country, yes, we have the government of our choice, we have selected a good leader, guiding, trying to make the best use of whatever, of a bad bargain, tough being up there, guiding the whole country of millions of people. But now that we have this, what next, right? Political emancipation is not the goal of life. How do we make our souls who are encaged in this bondage? And as Radha Maharaj once said, very nice thing. So this, we are in a jail. Durga means jail. Durga, right? But this jail is such that when we are in a jail, everyone can see that there's bars. There are incarcerated in some place where you have restricted freedom, right? Where you cannot just move on where you want. If there's a small cell of maybe 10 by 10 or whatever it is, right? But this is a jail which is made by the illusory energy, where there are no bars, a barless jail. And the beauty of this jail is that if you're in a jail, if you ever go to jail, I hope none of us have gone to jail in our life, right? And you want to go into this jail also. We may have gone to the police station, for example, for some conflict and this and that, but we don't want to enter into the jail, right? So the fact is that if you're in a jail, you want to come out of the jail somehow. You do something. You bring a big lawyer and do something. You want to get out, or sometimes people may bribe somebody or whatever. Just get out of the jail or take a bail, right? But this is a jail which is so fascinatingly made by the illusory energy that we don't even want to leave this jail. We are in a state of bondage. When the Britishers ruled us, we knew we are under foreign rule, and we wanted to fight out our case. So Quit India Movement, 1942, Mahatma Gandhi said, "Do or die." On that particular special day, I think it was August 5th, 1942, he said that do or die. Every Indian is Swaraj is your birthright. All these slogans were brought out, and Simon Paradza and Quit India Movement, all those things were there, right? Some of us we remember from our history. So there was a huge resistance which India offered to get rid of the shackles of bondage of foreign rule. But is it not surprising that we are bound tightly by the laws of nature, which keep us into the cycle of birth and death, adhyatmic, adhibhautik, and adhyavic miseries? We keep on getting ground and grinded in this rigmarole of this existence, the way it is going on like this for millions of lifetimes, and we don't even want to get out of this world. Why? Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, "Samsara lagilo bhalo." You start thinking the world is very wonderful. So Scripture tells us no. Scripture tells us no. Abrahma bhuna loka punaravartina arjuna. Mamukrita kvanteya punarjanmana vidyate. Right? Krishna, the most beautiful personality, right, who created this world for all his wayward children, disobedient children, rebellious souls that all of us are from the kingdom of God, from Krishna's Krishna Loka, Vaikuntha Loka. He brought us all here. He was sent here for reformation. And Krishna told us, well, you have to come back. Please understand, my dear children, Scripture is the word of God, that this world may not look so great for you. Mira Road, Surat, Bihar, wherever all of us are, we're not looking too great. Maybe you think that country is good, this country is good, that Canada is good, New Zealand is good. He said, no, America is good, Japan is good, whatever. No, he said, Krishna is saying, make it very clear. Brahma Bhuvana Loka, all lokas, right? All the 14 anti-systems. It's not a great place to be in this world, right? Because he created birth and death. But there is only temporary existence, and when there is temporary existence, there will be anxiety, because you are not temporary. We are spiritual, therefore we are eternal. How can the eternal soul feel happy in a temporary world? How can the free soul feel happy bounded by a body of matter? Right? So true dependence is understanding We depend on scriptures for guidance as our roadmaps. We depend on our acharyas for giving us the holy examples. Srila Prabhupada, how much we are obliged to him. He was in confrontation, not confrontation, but very strong dialogue with Bhakti Saraswati Thakur on the very first when they met. It was somewhere in October 1922. This is a almost 99-year-old story, right? A very relevant story. And they talked about this subject of independence. Prabhupada said, talking about, you want to talking about Krishna consciousness, Lord Chaitanya's movement and preaching all over the world in the Western language, in the English language, especially in the West. Who's going to listen to us? Because we are in a captive situation. We are under the British rule. Who will want to listen to a country which is already under a political bondage? We are under the colonial rule of the British. Who will want to hear from a country like that, which is sort of enslaved by foreign forces? So Thakur sort of acknowledged that question, that it was true that we are enslaved by them. He said this is so important for the soul that whether it is this party or that party, the emancipation of the soul is a subject that is beyond political freedom. Even if we have the best political party ruling us, the soul is still not free, right? Free to love, free from suffering, free from anxiety, free from death, free from disease, free from old age. This is not there. And to become free from all these things actually is true freedom. And that is what the scriptures give us. That is what Srila Prabhupada and the Acharyas have given us. The roadmap, pointing the figures towards Krishna Loka. Right? Krishna says very clearly, when it comes to him, Punar Janma na vidyate. Right? So truly our dependence ultimately is on whom? Not the Jhaduwala or the Bai or this and that. On a more earthly level, yes, we depend on so many things. But as far as our souls are concerned, for our inner self, we're dependent on Krishna's grace. And bhakti is the most beautiful path to access that grace. And within the school of bhakti, the most easiest, the most expedient process of accessing that grace of the Lord is by chanting his holy names. Right? So when we chant Krishna's holy names, with love, with devotion, with feeling, with emotion, right? That, my dear Lord, I'm dependent on your grace. Without your grace, I cannot even breathe. This air is part of your energy, right? I cannot see anything in this world. With all these tube lights, I cannot see anything. If there was no sun, there will not be any tube lights, right? So Krishna is even the sun, the moon, the air, the earth, and the water, right? So it is ludicrous, ridiculous, and crazy idea to think that we are independent. We are. The spirit soul, because of its minute nature, is always dependent on Krishna, right? And to acknowledge that, the humble heart, to accept that deeply within our hearts as with gratitude, and to really reciprocate with that understanding of what Krishna has done for us to maintain even the prisoners like us in this world, and himself coming in this world in so many avatars, like Lord Chaitanya and others, and coming in this world in form of scriptures of the acharyas, he has given us a path to come back to him. So ultimately, we're dependent on Krishna, right? So in the 6 symptoms of surrender, which is given by Rupa Goswami, he says very clearly, Anukulasya sankalpo, patikulasya vivarjanam. Goptitra mandam tatha, right? Karpanne, atmanikshepa. So there are 6 symptoms of surrender. And one of the most important symptoms of surrender is to accept in humility that we are dependent. We were dependent. We are dependent. And we will always remain dependent on the love of our Supreme Father, Sri Krishna, and the love of our Supreme Mother, Srimati Radharani. It is their grace, it is their love, it is their blessings which keeps us going on this beautiful track of Krishna consciousness. And it is our hope that by practicing it with more deeper understanding of the value of what we have got, the value of what we have got from our beloved Srila Prabhupada and the previous acharyas, and truly practicing and trying to live our lives and not just read, not just hear the holy words, but through reading, hearing, trying to live those words in our actual life. When they live those lives, and then Krishna, seeing our sincerity, we may be falling, tripping, like toddlers fall when they learn to walk. We may be doing so many things which are not perfect, but we are sincerely endeavoring on this path, and Krishna offers His grace. Therefore, it's called as His divine grace, right? And through His divine grace, He will take us to that land where there is complete freedom. Complete freedom. No bondage, no suffering, no birth, no disease, no old age, no death. Eternal life of bliss and knowledge and complete cognizance of the beauty and love of Krishna. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much, Prabhu, for an amazing discussion. If anyone has any questions, as we said, please post them in chat. We have a couple of questions, Prabhu.
Yeah.
One question is around relationships. When we said that if we pick interdependence, that's what keeps the relationship going, right? But is it that sometimes independence may be the right answer in some kind of relationships, like the India and the Britishers, that relationship, right? It was right for us to fight for independence. So, like, is there such? Could that happen in our lives?
Yeah. So correct. So it is not workable. If the Britishers felt they needed India, the Indians felt they needed the Britishers, and they're going to interdependency mode, then they could have been ruling our country for 10,000 years, and we have no problem, right? If they took care of our needs, they take care of our welfare. But they were not like that. They were demonically trying to destroy our culture, destroy our temples, loot away our wealth, right? And make us completely culturally stripped of our legacy and heritage, right? So they were not into any interdependence type of thing, right? They didn't care less. They felt we were primitive people worshipping a plant called tulsi and some stones called as Krishna's murti. They felt we were like that. We were idol worshippers. So they hated us for what we were doing, and therefore there was a completely incompatible situation where they were, completely sort of, brainwashed to think that they had come from a higher culture, right? Because of technology they had, and we belong to a lower culture, right? So they always felt superior to us, and therefore they enslaved us, they harassed us, tormented us, and did not give us any freedom. So at that point of time, we had to revolt, and we wanted to be independent. But as I said before, if they had taken care of our needs, respected our culture, respected our legacy and heritage, then, well, not a problem. We would have served them. And they would have helped us, in the goal of our life. And there would be, an independent situation. Not a problem.
Thank you, bro. Another question is, we talked about sometimes that we can encounter demons in our lives also, and they don't necessarily
encounter demons, you said?
Demons, yeah, and they don't necessarily have to be a very grossly demoniac. They can look noble and gentlemanly, but beat. So the question that someone is asking is that if we face these kind of demons in our lives, how should we deal with them?
It depends on what the relationship you have with the demon. On the most highest level of understanding, you need to understand that actually deep within everyone is a spirit soul, a spark of Krishna, Sachitananda. And it is unfortunate that he has been so covered over by the cloud of the illusory energy that he has lost his understanding of his real nature and has been so rebellious to the laws of God, and that has made him into a complete criminal in the eyes of God and the laws of nature, that is acting demonically. But deep down, actually, he is a pure spirit soul in one sense, right? So, how to deal with that situation depends on the time, place, and circumstances. If it is an avoidable situation where you can avoid interacting, generally we would, obviously want to not associate with such people. That's for sure. That's for sure, right? But if he's someone who's like very close, someone which you cannot avoid, then definitely we don't want to share or get hit or rubbed off by that mentality which they're having, right? So if it is avoidable, we avoid, but if not, otherwise we actually do something to protect, right? Like when you go for a war, it's not about just this demon, that demon. Practically, there are so many demons all around us, almost all the time, and we don't even realize that, even watching television is actually a part of, reinforcing our dark side, the demoniac side, or and doing things which you may think are very innocent otherwise, right? Uh, Using the mobile in a wrong way or whatever else, right? So it's not about just people being demons. It is just the whole culture of the world is demoniac. Let's look at it in a more broad way. The whole culture of Kali Yuga is promoting hedonistic, self-gratificatory pleasures, which are actually coming from the demonic realm, right? So it's not about protecting ourselves from this person or that person. It's the whole culture which is attacking us, right? So actually, we are the people who are vulnerable. To the extent our Krishna consciousness is not really fortified by good sadhana and good sadachar, good understanding of the Siddhanta, we are not fortified with the grace of the Lord coming in this form. To the extent we are vulnerable to not just demon, but demoniac forces, right? Which are trying to capture, not you, in a sense, not you in terms of the body, but trying to capture our consciousness, right? So it's not about just this person or that person. We need to be aware that it's all around the place. It's everything around is actually potentially can be derogatory and of a demonic nature, unless we really are, when you go out into the world, the work culture, the workplace, going around in this world, it's every sight, every sound is of that type, right? So unless we are really, really deeply Krishna conscious, we may become vulnerable, may be affected.
Thank you so much, Prabhu, for this was a really great answer. There is another question around interdependence that can, from one perspective, can't we also look at interdependence also from that it's also coming from a perspective of focusing on our needs or ourselves, right? In some sense, thinking of ourselves as the enjoyer or being selfish, like having some needs and looking for our needs also to be fulfilled.
Yeah, so that's fine. That's absolutely fine. You may have your self-interest, and the other person has his self-interest. So it's like by mutual consent, mutual consent that and not in a negative way that I scratch your back and you said my back, not like that. But it's like live and let live. Basically, it amounts to that. You live and let others live also, right? So independence means live and let live philosophy. So that's something which we want to accept, that in the material world it's going to be like that. That's totally acceptable. To live and to let live, to respect others for what they are, and understand that we need so many things in this world, and others need us also, right? So there's no problem. This material world, independence is something which we will have to accept is the foundational principle of life, right? Even if you're not a devotee, even if you're not practicing spirituality, independence is there. At every field, you will find that this is going to be important.
Thank you, bro. One more question. Many times, if we are not in the best of our consciousness, like some emotional disturbance or whatever, we lose this mood of interdependence, and even small faults of the other person in the relationship start making us agitated. So how to deal with this?
I think that's something which we all experience all too often, right? Especially you ask any you ask any grihastha, you ask, or maybe sometimes even between friends can happen, but I think we are more familiar with the grihastha's situation where householders they crib and they fight about various things about which happen between them, right? Or maybe even daughter-in-laws, mother-in-law, etc. Right? That more high risk type of relationships. So this is a issue of maturity, right? It's a matter of true wisdom of life, right? And as we say in psychology, we talk about this. You have two minds. How you respond, right? We're basically talking about responding. So how do you respond to that situation where we may play the independent card rather than the independent card? When we have this choice. So in a weak spot, we may play the wrong card and create mishap. So what it really means is that we have two minds essentially from how we sort of interact with the world outside and the people around us. One is called as the reactive mind. Other one is a more reflective mind, right? The reactive mind is the one which is very impetuous, right? Which is where there are no screenings, where there are no filters, no emotional filters, there is no language filters, and he's just sort of in a raw state. Like when you have a vomit, sorry for example, but when you vomit, right, there is no filters where only the good stuff comes out and the other things doesn't come out. When you vomit, just everything just comes out, right? So if you're in a more reactive state, the ugly things which are in our heart, which should not be brought out, which should be filtered, which should be processed, which should be kept aside, they can come out in a very ugly state. And once you vomit out, it's out. Everyone can see it, the dirt inside, right? So, and the dirt of a consciousness may pour out in this way, and therefore it may create a lot of disturbance, fractures in the relationships, misunderstandings may take place. Of course, if there is basic foundational love, which has been, it would depend on how much you've invested in the relationship. The investment has been good. You have invested well in the relationship. Then even something like that happens, it's something which can be mended. But if it is a weak investment relationship where you have really not put enough, then that is vulnerable. And therefore, why we perform our Krishna consciousness properly, why we take deep interest in spirituality, is that we are fortifying our reflective mind, right? Where we have the power to, when we go into maybe a quarrel or some difficulty, then you have power to actually control your anger, right? You have a power to really speak affirmatively, but not necessarily abusively, right? You have a power to react in a particular way, which is you want to react, but not in a way which is, demolishing the relationship, damaging the relationship. So you have to express yourself. It's not that you have to keep quiet or somebody shouting and screaming at you. It doesn't mean that you become dumb, but you become more cultured. You become more wise, become more mature, you become more controlled in expressing yourself in a particular way. And if you have somehow broken the norm and crossed the limits, you also have the power and the culture to actually go and say sorry and truly feel repentant for what has been said or done, right? You also have the strength to do that. So when you have that intact, then that comes from the realm of the reflective mind. So ultimately we depend on, as we said as a conclusion, we depend on Krishna. So we said, Krishna says, Dami, Buddhi, Yogam, Tam, right? All knowledge, forgetfulness, remembrance comes from Krishna, right? Matas Patil Jnanapanam Cha. So if we have been practicing Krishna consciousness properly, then Krishna will inspire our reflective intelligence to actually make us understand what went wrong and what should be done now, right? If we've been faithful to Krishna, Krishna will inspire from within us the right things to do and speak now. Maybe some damage is already done, right? But how to repair damage? Like, sometimes wall can get damaged, or your scooter can get damaged, your car can get damaged, but it doesn't mean that you have to throw the car out, right? Your car get damaged, you go into an accident, you take it to the right person, get it mended. Your vehicle gets crashed or something, you can always use the vehicle again, mend it up, right? So your relationship can get damaged sometimes, just like you have a dent or a scratch or a flat tire. You can have something like in the relationship also. But if you have been Krishna conscious, you've been, as I said, mature, wise, and then you can always go back and do something to repair the damaged. So that's the way Krishna consciousness comes to our help. Hare Krishna. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, thank you, bro. Really thorough, detailed answer. We have a couple of more questions. That's fine, bro. If time wise, yeah. So one question is again around this interdependence theme, that in the case of marriage, sometimes if we see that two people don't really share the same goals and aspirations, and rather than interdependence, they're seeing conflicts again and again. So what to do? Is it better to end that relationship in, just like we said, for Indians and Britishers, or is it better to keep it
You know, we may have to diagnose the problem. You don't throw away the baby with the bathtub, as they said, right? So we need to diagnose why. If there's a problem in the relationship, it's like a disease, right? It started off very well, obviously. Others, they are not having happy in a marriage. It started off, that means the relationship was healthy to start with for the first few days, for a few weeks, or maybe months, maybe a few years, whatever. The fact that the marriage took place, that means there was a healthy, good, auspicious, well-meaning beginning, right? But like the disease, like the body, it can get disease. You can have a virus, you can have bacteria, it can come in and infect and cause sores, or gastroenteritis or meningitis or some COVID infection, anything like that. It can get disease. So also the relationship can become infected by pride, by arrogance, by wild words, by irresponsible behavior, by indecisive, wrongly taking decisions, right? So there could be infections of various types that can take place, or maybe by immoral behavior. Could be many things. Could be numerous infections can take place. But as I said before, more like a doctor, can we sit back and diagnose what's happening and why? Now, when you're trying to sit and diagnose, it is important that we understand what is my contribution to this disease infection. Because obviously when things are happening between two parties, not only one person is not doing the things and everyone else, the other person not doing anything. So, there is action, reaction taking place both sides. So we may not be able to analyze about the other person's contribution, but as is often said in English, and we want to follow this in our life, is that let us be a part of the solution rather than being the part of the problem. Now, if this is your mindset, so first we have to bring this mindset activated in your consciousness, that there's a problem, right? And I'm definitely contributing to the problem. So the other person also contributing to the problem. And we both are contributing to the problem. And the more we contribute to the problem, the more the problem is increasing, the infection is increasing, the fracture is increasing, the distance is increasing, and the hate and the whatever is increasing, the gap is increasing, right? So first, when you activate that part of your understanding, that we talk about interdependence, right? So let's keep that in mind. So when you keep that in mind, you say, what is the way I am contributing to the problem? And what can I do to contribute less to the problem? Maybe I should keep quiet. Maybe I should take some help. Maybe I should read some books on this. Maybe I should, ask for forgiveness. Maybe I should, do things better. Maybe I should become more responsible, right? It could be various things which you can do. And you can do. There's nothing that you cannot do. You can do. It's just you don't want to do it. That's our problem. I will not do this because the false ego dictates you at that time. The problem is always on the opposite side. The finger is always pointed to, it's all about you, right? But as you said, the three fingers are about us, right? So we want to keep this finger out. When we chant Hare Krishna mantra, we keep this finger out. That's the reason we keep this finger out of this hole in the bead bag. You want to get away from this tendency of you, right? So when you make this conscious understanding that I am contributing to the problem also to a certain extent, and most of the time it is like 50-50. It's not like 50-50. Most of the time we are playing a significant role also. And then when you pray, when you analyze, when you introspect with a genuine heart, if I said it before, again, it comes from Krishna. If your false ego is dominating the entire scene, you won't see. The false ego is like a cloud, right? When the cloud is dominating, you don't see the sun. Like right now it is, we are just 6 o'clock. And right now in Mira Road, where I'm sitting in front of the bed, it's like quite dark now because the sun is there in the western horizon. It's quite dark because there's clouds, right? If the false ego is controlling the situation heavily, then you're going to be clouded and you can't see, you can't understand, you don't know how to behave. But again, we're dependent on Krishna, right? So if you are devotees and genuine devotees, not just so-called devotees, superficial devotees, make-believe devotees, right? We are truly devotees of the Lord, then our shelter is Krishna. So you sit back, either with a bead bag or in your own solitude of your heart, and pray, my dear Lord, what can I do to save this very sacred, important relationship in my life? And if you really pray, I can be very, very honest with you, and that Krishna always responds. We just have to approach him. We don't approach the Lord. We just get too much bogged down by the here and now. And therefore, if you sit back and pray to the Lord, then he will guide you from within the heart. And then you will know there are not one but many things you can do to help the situation. And if the opposite person sees that we're making these attempts many times, right, that at least you have reduced the problem to a certain extent, right? And oftentimes when you really do those things, you may be irritating the opposite person or sending the wrong signal from that may understand, you may understand that now he or she is not doing those things, right? He's not answering back or he's not whatever. They get the right signals, right? And they also may gradually change. So this is something to think about, how we can repair a damaged relationship.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. A couple of these answers could be sessions by themselves. It felt like. One last question. So this is on the other side of dependence on Krishna. So someone is asking that in our neophyte stage, everything in bhakti is a little difficult to reach for us practically. So how do we try and feel dependent on Krishna in our day-to-day life?
Well, as I said, we may not really depend on Krishna. Krishna may be a little more, more intellectual type of understanding of the Lord. But what is more understandable easily is devotee association. Now, haven't we all seen so many times that the moment you associate more with non-devotee people, that we get affected by their mindset, their words, their attitudes, their perceptions, their opinions, right? It hits us. We start thinking maybe like them, right? So we know that to keep ourselves safeguarded, even in a neophyte state, as you said, and we all are neophytes, right? That we need to have a balanced association with Krishna's devotees who talk about Krishna, whether it's through lectures, hearing, associating, reading with Prabhupada, reading Prabhupada's books, or actually going to satsang programs. In COVID, we may not have attended so many physically. We may attended more, like the one we are having right now. We are more talking, on an online platform, right? But then we all know what the value of devotee association is. Going for yatras, going to temple, eating prasadam together, dancing, singing together, right? And we are in that environment. That is when the reason we want to go there in that environment is a way of showing to the Lord that I depend on this Sangha. I depend on the Vaishnava Sangha. So our practical manifestation of depending on Krishna is expressed through our sincerity in chanting Krishna's holy names. I depend on Krishna's grace in the holy name. I depend on Vaishnava Sangha. I depend on my spiritual masters and their holy words to guide me in my life, so I don't get confused with all the propaganda of this world, which is, as I said, quite demoniac. So in this way, we express dependency in very practical ways by taking shelter of the spiritual masters, the devotee, and the holy scriptures, and most of all, the holy names of the Lord. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. I think we can end here. So thank you for this wonderful session and the entire discussion, which was on two aspects mainly. The first thing you started off speaking about interdependence in relationships, and how every relationship only works till both parties are interdependent. And some very nice examples like Lord Ram's and Sugriev's relationship, and in our practical lives also, the Grihastha congregation and the temple brahmacharis need to be interdependent for preaching to happen. And a very amazing perspective on how humans and demigods are also interdependent for nature to function smoothly. So um, that was really nice. And after that, the second aspect that we spoke about was about um, that even though we have gotten politically independent, but truly the living entity truly can never be independent in this world. And true independence would come from getting freedom from all the problems and all the difficulties of this material world, and which can paradoxically only come when we truly understand how we are dependent on Krishna's grace through
Correct.
the scriptures and through the
Yeah.
guidance of the
Yeah.
devotees. So uh, really great session. Thank you so much, Prabhu. And after that, of course, thanks for the amazing wisdom-filled answers to all of our questions. So we would especially like to thank you, since you came on such short notice to be with us today. In spite of your busy schedule and Mataji could not be here, but you still took out the time.
Yeah. So sorry for that. She couldn't add her wisdom to today's discussion. But I'm glad that it made me think more deeply about the need for me to become more dependent on Krishna's grace on today's Independence Day.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. And of course, you've been here before as well. And we hope that you and Mataji will keep coming and giving us your association again and again. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for attending this session. Please stay connected with our channel so you can have access to many more such wonderful sessions. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna, Prabhu.